Hi, everyone. My name is Colleen Gustitis, and I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Cofense. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today for our Q1 2024 Phishing Intelligence and Quarterly Trends Briefing. We know email still reigns supreme when it comes to cybercrime these days. Relying solely on traditional SEG technology is simply not good enough to protect your organization from today's cyber criminals. And we at Cofense, we know this because we see it every single day. The team is here today to share what they witnessed in Q1 and the trends they saw in Q1 2024. Joining us today is Jared Slotich, Product Manager, Intelligence for Cofense, and Max Gannon, Manager, Intelligence Analysis for the same organization. Welcome, Jared and Max. Thank you all for giving us your time and your expertise today. Quickly, I just wanted to go over the agenda and some housekeeping items with the attendees. A couple of topics here on housekeeping. We're going to start by taking a look at the overall phishing landscape. We'll talk then about some specific campaigns and developments that the team saw in Q1. We'll finish off with a discussion about credential phishing and the outlook for Q2. And then after that, we'll open it up for Q&A. You can also ask questions anytime throughout the webinar in the portal there on your console in the Q&A window. The webcast is being recorded, and everyone here today will receive a link to the recorded session once the webcast has concluded. On the right side of your console, I also wanted to point out that there's some helpful email security related resources. Please peruse it as you see fit, either during or after we go to Q&A. Now that that's all out of the way, I'm going to turn it over to Jared and Max to get us started.
All right, thanks, Colleen. Really appreciate you setting this up and the great introduction there. I do see a lot of familiar faces, or at least names, in the attendees list. So for our returning attendees, I greatly appreciate you joining us again. And for our new attendees, we hope that you get something very valuable out of this. As Colleen covered here in the agenda, we've got basically a recap of the last 3 months. But here at Cofense Intelligence, we put this into perspective of where we are coming from, so particularly 2023, and then we'll lead that conversation into the predictions on what we plan to see within the coming quarters of this year as well. So some of the highlights that we have here are that our ATRs, so for those who don't recall or are new here, the ATRs are our active threat reports. These are our bread and butter for the intelligence product that we produce. They are a very simplified version of the larger finished intelligence reports that we provide. ATRs give you just some of the most basic and fundamental details of attack events, so whether that's malware or credential phishing. So you'll see that a lot as we move forward through this presentation. But what is very notable from the previous quarter here in Q1 of 2024 is that we saw ATRs related to taxes with a 314% increase, and benefits themed ATRs saw a 644% increase. So quite large volume increases, and any anomalies or outlying metrics like this obviously are very easy for us to shift our analysis and production workflow towards looking into the why of that. So we'll get into that a bit more later. Due to some of our new tooling, we've made a lot of improvements to how we are classifying and originally identifying some of the common malware in particular. So because of this, we were able to provide quite a bit more detail to our analysis, and this helped us identify an increase of anywhere from 300% in the case of Formbook, or up to like just over 1,300% for the Agent Tesla keylogger, which for many of you who have been in this cybersecurity industry will be familiar with Agent Tesla. It's been around a long time. It's evolved. It's adaptable. It's still here, still being used. Web3 related service Cloudflare, we saw a 423% increase in usage from Q4 of last year, 2023, indicating that Web3 services being used for credential phishing may be making a comeback. We have seen some ebb and flow in the popularity of using Web3 services such as Cloudflare. We believe that we're seeing that an uprise here in Q1 will lead to an additional increase in continued activity. We'll get more into that in our prediction section toward the end. Also of note is that the most popular remote access tool, a RAT, from Q4 of 2023, which was Remco's RAT, was replaced this quarter in Q1 of 2024 by STR RAT with almost 403% more emails. So again, another one of those very notable activity shifts requiring us to actually dig in and write some reports on that to get the information to you guys. With a shift in the usage, we catalog, identify, and report a shift in the IOCs, the indicators of compromise. Ultimately, those get fed into your security apparatus and enable you to better mitigate these security threats as they evolve, but also just as they are shifting in tactics and techniques. Additional highlights that we saw are the PDF files, which continue to make up approximately 60% of all file attachments in phishing emails successfully reaching enterprise users. Now, PDFs, again, they've been around for quite some time, but they're used in both credential phishing and moderate to advanced malware campaigns, and that's what makes this very notable. It's worth mentioning that email comprises it remains the most common attack vector for threat actors. Phishing campaigns comprise about 90% of all cyber attacks, an estimated figure, but still of note is that the high volume there shows that this is still a very relevant attack vector, and we obviously predict that it will continue to be. And within that, PDF files being some of the expected traffic have maintained their position as one of the most popular file attachments that we see. New for the latter half of last year and continuing into Q1, the Picabot loader saw a 40% decrease in volume as compared to the Q4, whereas Darkgate saw a 368% increase. So the way that we interpreted this, and we're continuing our analysis, but the way we interpret it currently is that this shows a favoritism between the two malware families. Max will go into a bit more detail with these two later in the presentation, but just real quick, they kind of popped up in the wake of the CACbot takedown last year. So to fill that vacuum, Picabot, Darkgate, somewhat new malware families, but as we monitor the activity, we can start deriving trends of what is being implemented by threat actors. So very interesting to see, very much an ongoing investigative analysis, and it will continue into the future here. So lastly, Google.com saw a 53% less use in credential phishing as compared to Q4 of 2023. Although it was still in the top 3 out of our top 10 most used top-level domains that are being used for credential phishing. So it's still popular, but as I was mentioning earlier, a couple of the other highlights, any anomalous activity requires further investigation. So seeing 53% drop in activity from Google.com is of note, and we wanted to mention it here. So what is getting through? So secure email gateways, as Colleen mentioned in the introduction here, there is, as we all know, data that malicious data is finding ways past secure email gateways. Now, this is not the fault of the SEGs in particular. They traditionally operate off of rule sets and allow lists, and some of the more modern and adaptable ones are integrating things like some machine learning, and they are great. They are necessary within your security stack, but we should always endeavor to remember that they are not an end-all, be-all, catch-all for all malicious activity regarding email. So here are some of the examples that we have found just in Q1 of the threats that we observed reaching end users' inboxes in SEG-protected environments. So you can see that this list also highlights how our training compares to SEG performance, because much of the data seen here came from emails that customers reported. So it's not just our automated tools and our analysis from our side, from some of like our MSSP services that are catching these. These are actually being reported by end users as well. So again, this is not meant to highlight that SEGs are ineffective. Much the opposite. They are very effective at what they do. They need to continue to increase their capabilities, and as such can also be augmented by things like intelligence and threat feeds.
All right, looks like Jared is experiencing some technical difficulties, so I will be taking over from here. I just want to really re-emphasize that this isn't just about SEGs getting bypassed, but this is also kind of, I see a bit of like a hall of fame, because these are serious threats, especially some of the ones like Picobot, in Darkade, they're really advanced. So seeing that customers have reported these means that they're able to see through really advanced emails, ones that are very convincing. They're able to see them and they're able to say, okay, this is suspicious, and report it. So it's not just, like SEGs are bad, because they're not, but it's also saying, here's what people can find when they're trained right. So I'm proud of seeing these here. So here we have the most prevalent malware of Q1 2024 divided into the malware types. And then we have the top malware family in each type on the right. As I mentioned earlier, Agent Tesla Keylogger continued to be the most popular malware family by far, leading to keyloggers being the most popular malware type. Information stealers have typically been in first or second place. However, this time rats, specifically led by STR took second place. So information stealers led by Formbook were the only malware type and family that saw about the same number of emails in Q1 2024 as compared to Q4 2023, which is unusual. So it means they were about the same. And usually threat actors have a little bit more variation in what they use. The next up, we have the loader malware type. And this is primarily made up of Picobot in both Q4 2023 and Q1 2024. So it still managed to take fourth place. And lastly, we have the other malware type, which, as you can see, is very small. In Q1 2024, it was primarily composed of reconnaissance tools. And these are typically relatively advanced tools that are used when threat actors are performing reconnaissance. So it's usually threat actors who are a step up from using Agent Tesla Keylogger. They're actually trying to investigate the network that they've infected and try to get as much information as they can before deploying additional threats. Luckily, we don't see as much of that. So here we have, as you can see, the monthly top 10 malware families. Improvements to our tooling in early February provided greater than ever volume of emails associated with reports, specifically of reports delivering common malware such as Agent Tesla Keylogger, STR-RAT, Remcos-RAT, Snake Keylogger, and Formbook. And these are all pretty commonly seen ones that threat actors who don't have much skill will use, because they can find them for free online, or if they really want to splurge, they can get the paid versions, which have a lot of additional features. So these improvements that we made led to an increase in reports, but mostly they led to a better association of email volume with the reports. So in this chart, Agent Tesla Keylogger is actually truncated about a fifth of the total value for February and March so that you can actually see the differences in the other malware families. I know there's a lot of different malware families to see here, but if you can notice the growth of Snake Keylogger, Formbook, Remcos Rat, and STR Rat as the quarter progresses, each of these continues to get higher and higher, whereas Agent Tesla Keylogger just goes right through the roof. So here we have the top 5 delivery mechanisms. As you can see, we had higher volumes of these as well. CVE 2017-11882, which has been the most popular delivery mechanism for some time, continued to be the most popular by a significant margin. .NET loaders, which are executables with the .NET framework, they led the next closest rank by, again, significant margin from VBS downloaders. And they actually went up in the rankings from Q4 2023. Back then, they trailed second place by only 6%, but in Q4, they were in second place and trailed it by 16%. So a bit of a difference. The significant increase is due to the fact that they were largely used to deliver Agent Tesla Keylogger and other common malware families that, as I mentioned, we've been seeing more of, and that was impacted by our improved tooling. Way down at the far end, in the 3rd and 5th place delivery mechanisms, those have remained consistent with Q4 2023. The meteoric rise from Office documents, which were in like 10th place last time, it's about 657%, is due to the use of Office documents to deliver Darkgate wrap, which we've talked about before. And we talked about previously in some of our strategic analyses that Darkgate and Picabot appeared in some ways to potentially be successors to Quackbot. So as I mentioned, CVE 2017-11882 is the #1 delivery mechanism, despite the fact that a patch to prevent it has been out for like ever. It's still really popular. So here we have a breakdown of what is usually delivered. As always, Agent Tesla Keylogger is the most common. However, Remcos Rat actually took the place of Formbook as the next most commonly delivered payload. The last place, which is currently Nanocore Rat, frequently changes, and it's really indicative of whatever the most common free rat is among threat actors. So we've seen Ave Maria, Nanocore, Async, a bunch of different rats, and it really just fluctuates. But the other 3, Lokibot, Formbook, and Remcos, those are typically in the top 5, even though they may change positions. So here we have the top C2 servers by IP address geolocations. So it's important to know that this isn't necessarily where the threat actor is located, but it's where the service that they use is. So tracking C2 servers provides insights into a range of malicious activities across the globe. The nodes can deliver phishing campaigns or command malware. They often receive information and exfiltrated data from infected hosts. So that's probably the biggest reason that we track them. As you can see, there were really only minor differences between last quarter and this quarter. Hong Kong was replaced by Bulgaria, while the 2nd through 5th place countries all had lower percentages in Q1 than in Q4. But to balance this out, the United States had a higher share of the C2 locations. Potentially due to the number of proxy services located in it, the United States continues to be the most popular C2 location, and that's honestly been the case since we started tracking. It's just so frequently used. So next up, we're going to cover some of the notable campaigns and developments in this quarter. Specifically, we're going to focus on our strategic analyses and flash alerts. So first off, we have our flash alert about shipping themes. So this flash alert, originally we were just kind of curious about phishing themes in general. We said, okay, we'll look at phishing themes around the holidays. But then we decided to expand that. So this data actually covered 2021 to 2023, year long, and looked at several different targeted industries. So what we found was actually pretty interesting. You might think, and we originally thought, that around the holidays, you would see a lot more shipping themed emails. That would certainly make sense because people are looking for packages. So you would see emails taking advantage of that. We actually saw only a minor increase in shipping themed emails delivering malware around the holidays. So this does come with the caveat that although we don't track it, we did notice to some extent that you'll find more emails trying to scam people that aren't really credential phishing or malware, but emails that say like, you know, we delivered your package, but you weren't there. So give us your social security number and then we'll give you your package. That's basically what these boil down to, and people do fall for them. So we were pretty surprised to see that actual emails delivering malware and credfish that were shipping themed did not follow along those lines. And here we have the most common phishing email themes of 2023. So we tracked a bunch of different themes, and here we're seeing the top 4 most popular: finance, notification, response, and shipping. And you'll see some interesting trends. For example, for some reason in Q2, response theme emails were very popular. Threat actors really focused on using response themes. For whatever reason, it was really attractive to them. So these themes are related to the reports that we do. As Jared mentioned, we have ATRs, or active threat reports. So each report has a theme, and that helps determine the threat. And this theme doesn't seem as important, but it's actually very useful. So for example, we might have travel assistance as the theme. And if we say we're looking at travel assistance themed emails targeting the oil and gas sector, we could narrow it down and we could say, okay, there's basically none. So the oil and gas sector doesn't really need to worry too much about travel assistance themed emails, but they might want to focus on benefits themed emails because that's something that we've noticed being more interesting around this time of year. So tracking these themes is important. And some of the most interesting trends we noticed were that benefits themed emails were most popular in Q1 and Q4. We saw very little in Q2 and Q3, which was a bit of a surprise. And then we had legal themed emails. So these are ones like saying there's a court summons for you, or the court is calling you because you have to pay a fine for bad parking or something like that. So we saw most of these in Q3 and Q4. I guess they decided that the later in the year it was, the more likely people would believe it. But the thing that was most interesting to us is that tax themes were actually most common in Q3. Personally, before we did this research, I thought tax themes would be most common around the start of tax season. But as it turns out, threat actors seem to think that it will be easier to take advantage of people after most people have filed their taxes, because then they're more likely to react to a scary theme like the IRS is auditing you, click here. So that was interesting to see. All right, so next up we have ThreatHQ, which is really the intelligence central platform. So off to the left, you can see we have several different sections. We have dashboard, search active threats, all these different things. So we're going to cover them briefly. So search active threats is useful for analysts, for people who really want to know more about a specific theme. Oh, okay. Looks like Jared is actually back. So I will switch over to him now.
Okay, yeah, thanks for covering, Max. And I do apologize to everyone here having some computer issues this morning. Of course, Murphy is taking full effect here in my house. But yes, greatly appreciate. And as I'm sure you guys saw, we have quite a well-rounded team of experts here who are, they every day have their sleeves rolled up and are waiting in this data so we can cover down for each other. So yeah, I'll hop in here on ThreatHQ because this has been a labor of love for many years. We have made quite substantial improvements to it. Some of them noticeable, like in the front end here with these interactive charts, but a lot of the work actually happens in the back end. And for those of you who use it regularly, I'm sure you've noticed I have received feedback from you that it does run very smoothly, and that's good. Always good to hear. Everything that we publish gets sent up and populated here within ThreatHQ. So for Cofense Intelligence subscription customers, they have access to the full corpus of our intelligence within 2 years of rolling 2 years worth of data that you can query against. You can read all the previous finished intelligence reports that we published, and this actually enables you to see essentially what we are working on. As Max was highlighting, this is a research platform. So feel free to hop in here with your login and to take a look at the information that could augment your investigation that you may be working on within your company. So let me make sure I covered everything here. Max, did I miss anything? Sorry, I was hopped in here right halfway through your speech.
No worries. I think the most important parts are just that you can search active threat reports, which is good for analysts, but the finished intelligence provides greater trend information and focused information that people higher up the chain can use to make decisions. So it really provides information for anybody who has a subscription to our product. So it's really worth looking at.
Yeah, excellent point. And just as kind of a bit of a teaser, we have a very active roadmap is probably the best way to describe it this year. There's a lot of new features in the work, a lot of new capabilities, many of which have been requested by several of our attendees here, but also some things that we've seen that can, in the greater industry, that can help us and help you do better and more robust analysis. So Max mentioned trending. We've got some visualization and some usability improvements with how you interact with the data. We've got some additional capabilities that I'm not ready to announce yet, but this year we'll see many great improvements to this platform. So we're really looking forward to it. It's a pretty exciting year for Cofense Intelligence and Threat HQ. Okay. Well, Max, I believe this was one of the slides that you wanted to cover, correct? So I can hand it back over to you.
I'll take care of the rest of these strategic analyses and flash alerts because I was a bit more directly involved in them. So this one focused on a campaign we saw in January of 2024. One of the key things about this is, as you can see from looking at the email, it's pretty basic. It's certainly got a lot of text. They did put effort into having a full narrative, but there's no logos. There's nothing really particular that draws you in and convinces you it's important. And they just don't have a lot of the characteristics that usually, stick out. But they still bypassed SEGs, which is what made it so interesting to us. They didn't have a particularly targeted industry. It was more of a just spray to see who they could get to fall for it. But they got into a lot of different organizations. So the key thing that did this is you see that click here link. That was actually a marketing or Google advertisement link. And because of that, SEGs were a lot less likely to detect and block it because it looks more or less legitimate. So when you visited these links, then you'd get some JavaScript, which delivered net support rat. So net support rat is pretty well known as being one of the most pseudo-legitimate remote access tools out there that is frequently used for malicious purposes. So next we have a flash alert that we did. So flash alerts are when we find something interesting that we think would be valuable for you to see right away. So it's usually focused on ones that are more targeted and that present a significant threat. So in this case, these campaigns were targeting the oil and gas industry, and they were being very effective at bypassing SEGs, and they were highly targeted. So we felt it was important to let people know about this campaign as soon as possible. So as soon as we were able to get it out, we let everybody know. And later on, we did a more in-depth strategic analysis, which I'll talk about, which really focused more on the details of the campaign. So here we have one that I did. It's about SVG files. So SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics File. So originally they're supposed to be used as image files, but if you treat them correctly, they can actually act as HTML files. And because of that, it allows them to deliver embedded content. There was actually a tool created in May of 2022 called AutoSmuggle. And with AutoSmuggle, you would just take the AutoSmuggle executable, give it an SVG file name, and give it a file, and it would bundle it up so that when someone opened the SVG, the file would be dropped onto their desktop. So the file could be a zip archive containing malware, or it could just be malware itself. And this AutoSmuggle tool made it really easy to use this. And SVG files were not seen as a major delivery mechanism because of how unique they are. So they were really able to take advantage of this. So we saw 4 really distinct campaigns using SVG files, and you've got them diagrammed out here for you. And the 2 most recent unique campaigns started in December of 2023 and early 2024. And they were very clearly using AutoSmuggle. So as you'll see, starting with the first diagram, we have an email, and attached to the email is an SVG file. That SVG file, when you open it, gives you a zip archive, and that zip archive contains a JavaScript file, which eventually downloads Agent Tesla. And then in the bottom section, it's a little bit more complicated. So in one of them, they have an attached PDF, and the PDF contains a link to download an SVG file, which eventually delivers XWormRat. And another one, there is a link to download an SVG file, and that eventually leads to XWormRat as well. And then finally, there's just an attached SVG, which delivers a VBS script, which delivers XWormRat. So these campaigns are really characterized by delivering XWormRat, other than that original Agent Tesla campaign, which was from some time ago. So it was very interesting to see threat actors exploiting this tool so successfully. And you could also clearly track that it was one threat actor or a close-knit group of threat actors, given how consistently they like delivering XWormRat and using the same C2s. So this one is actually what we based, or is the extended version of the Flash Alert. So it focused on Radamanthus Stealer, which was the one that was delivered. These emails for this campaign were relatively advanced, and they actually seem to look AI or ML generated. It's, of course, impossible to really prove that's what it is, but there were a lot of signs of it, which typically indicates a more advanced threat actor. So the campaigns used primarily Google Maps and Google Image URLs, which is what allowed them to bypass so many segs. And those URLs would redirect to a page containing a PDF, as you can see in the image. And this PDF would have an embedded URL. And when you clicked it, it would download Radamanthus Stealer. So it seemed a bit odd that it was delivering Radamanthus Stealer, because that's not a commonly seen thing. But we looked into it, and it looks like shortly before this campaign, Radamanthus Stealer got an update, which enabled it to be a lot more stealthy and enabled it to avoid a lot more detection. So as soon as the threat actors improved on it, people immediately started using it. And here I'm going to hand it off back to Jared, and he's got some interesting credential phishing trends for you.
All right, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Max. And just as a quick reminder too, for everything that Max just covered there with some of the specific examples and on the campaigns and the trends we saw in Q1, all of this is published in our finished intelligence reports, where there are strategic analyses that are rolled up into our executive phishing summaries, our flash alerts in the case of like the Radamanthus that one of our analysts identified very quickly, and I believe that we were first to market on it. But that's what the purpose of the flash alerts is, to get you guys the information as quickly as possible. And then if there is additional information as we continue our investigation, we would generate something like a strategic analysis. Again, all of these are available within ThreatHQ with an intelligence subscription. You can log in there. And we also email. There's an option to opt into email notification of the finished intelligence reports as they are published. So really great information that came from Max and his team of analysts this past quarter here. Really notable stuff that's paving the way for the threat landscape for the rest of this year here. So overall, we'll look at some of the roll-ups here. Credential phishing emails went down by around 13% from when comparing Q4 of 2023 to Q1 of 2024. So obviously, that our first question is why. We need to start looking at why we believe this has happened. But we also, in looking at that and trying to answer that why question, we also saw an overall 43% decrease in phishing emails when comparing Q1 of 2024 with Q1 of 2023. So a historically lower volume of time, perhaps, hangover from the holidays, just starting into the new year. There's a variety of different reasons here, and obviously we want to continue monitoring that and continue asking why. What this indicates is that while at least in what we're seeing this year is that while Q1 of 2024 was more or less in line with the prior quarter, in fact we saw a significant decrease compared to what would normally be expected for this time of year, as I was just saying. So it is the tradition, and within the intelligence mindset here, we can look at anomalies, right? And that is kind of a tipping and queuing aspect that we would say that would ultimately lead us to asking why. Those anomalies can be an increase, they can be a decrease, or they can be the same. So really, as intelligence professionals here, we just need to always be looking and comparing with previous, so that way we can start looking to get as far ahead of the curve as we can. And as I'm sure all of you know here, continuous daily battle will never ever be that far ahead, but we have to endeavor to try and stay at least as close to the curve as possible. Now, one specific characteristic that we believe is contributing to that this year for this period is that it may be due to an increase in complex but low volume credential phishing campaigns, much like the increase in complex but low volume malware campaigns covered as a topic in this quarter's strategic analysis. So previously, we may have seen very noisy credential phishing or malware campaigns that created a lot of IOCs, a lot of network volume that were just slamming our appliances, setting off alerts right and left. Now that in and of itself is again notable, but and we need to catalog that and continue our analysis of it. But this year specifically, we saw lower volume. I just don't want everybody who's reading this or hearing the presentation here to think, okay, well, volume is down, so that means the threat is down. That is almost never the case. It just means a shift in the tactics and techniques that threat actors are using. So as I previously mentioned before my computer decided to not participate today, we had a shift in the top 10 top level domains in each stage, specifically when we were talking about Google before. So within these two comparative tables here, we see the top 10 TLDs that are used in stage 1 and stage 2 of credential phishing, right? So stage 1 initial, like things like reconnaissance or first contact. Stage 2 in the deployment and activation of some of the IOCs. So stage 1 TLDs they are embedded in the phishing email itself, while the stage 2 are used as redirects or are embedded in credential phishing websites, right? So like landing pages, portals that you would be directed to. So first, let's look at the top 10 TLDs used in stage 1. Q1 of 2024, we saw a slight decrease in the prevalence of the .com TLD among stage 1 TLDs, but this was offset by an increase in the usage of .net, right? So volumes change, but really what's notable here that we wanted to highlight is that there's just a shift in the vector, right? Shifting from .com to .net, still relatively the same amount of volume, or even if decreased volume, still being used as attack vectors. Now, when we look specifically at like the .ru, .org, .org, or derivatives of .com, right? Like .com, .br TLDs from Q4 of 2023. These were replaced by .app, .to, .co.uk, right? So there is a pretty noticeable shift there. And I believe what this is indicative of, and what we've been discussing here, and obviously continuing to investigate, is it's just a perhaps path of least resistance. It's an availability thing. It's a shift in tactics to see what's effective. There's not really anything too notable from the aspect of getting ahead and trying to mitigate this threat and being able to predict where they're going to shift to next. But the fact that they are shifting around shows, it shows probing. It shows, you can call it ingenuity, but it is just the activity of humans trying to move and shift where they are coming from when they are deploying their threat campaigns. Specifically, the .app TLD was heavily featured in campaigns that were spoofing Meta, right? So a Facebook parent, and the .co.uk top level domain was often seen as part of the google.co.uk embedded URLs that redirected to credential phishing pages. So again, notable activity there, and stuff that we want to catalog. Historically, .app has not ever been as popular as things like .co or .com or .net. So that's another thing that we're looking at. Not just why specifically Meta was being spoofed. They could just be a target of opportunity as a mega corporation. But there could be other characteristics that also do contribute to why .app was specifically used there. Meta being parent company of Facebook, Facebook being a web app, things like that, right? So always digging in further on that, and then keep an eye out for any analysis that we may be providing through finished intelligence reports too. So now let's transition over to stage 2 on the right. The top TLDs used in stage 2, they were mostly consistent with the previous quarter. Except for there were a couple differences in the volumes of the first and second place, so .com and .ru there. Although the .com TLD was used less in stage 1, it was used frequently enough in stage 2 that it was still overall more common in both stages in Q1 of 2024 than in Q4 of 2023. Notable other notable TLDs such as like .io and the another .com derivative, the .com.br TLDs from Q4 were actually replaced by .site and .xyz. Part of this, I believe that part of the reasoning for this is that if several of you probably recall the flood of new TLD variations that were released last year by the internet gods, to include quite some odd ones, things like .xyz, which traditionally, it doesn't mean anything, right? But it's just another vector, again, as I was mentioning earlier, another vector that threat actors can leverage for either hosting credential phishing campaigns, C2s, things like that. So both the .site and .xyz TLDs were used largely in campaigns spoofing Microsoft too. So just like we were talking about with analyzing the trends of Meta and why .app was used so heavily with them, we were also monitoring Microsoft with .site and .xyz. So and there's a handful of other examples as well, but we're still continuing to ask why, still doing our analysis there. So now the top abused .com domains, this is always kind of fun to see as well and monitor how it shifts over time. As we mentioned previously in this presentation with Web3, this is showing that Cloudflare was, as we observed in Q1 of this year, really it hopped up to the the top ranking spot here for most abused .com domains. Google actually dropped down to 3, which was kind of interesting. I believe, we've got several different theories, and again, analysis is ongoing, but Google was really hit hard last year with as far as like the threat actors using the google.com and the subdomains to host some of their malicious content. So we believe that this is just kind of an ebb of that. So the activity there is dropping off as they shift to other domains that they were not previously using. We also did publish last year, so this isn't a Q1 of 2024 topic, but we published last year on how smart links and Google AMP, which is the accelerated pages, which essentially allow you to they've been abused by attackers, particularly in the last half of last year, and we are still seeing some of that activity happening this year. And believe it will continue. But we believe that really increased in popularity around Q3 of last year, continued into Q4. It's dropped off a little bit here in Q1, but that is probably why we're seeing the google.com domain dropping down to 3rd place here. But you see some other notable participants in here as well. Linode Objects, the Linode, the cloud service provider there, has maintained a pretty steady traffic spot. We're also seeing like SharePoint, while Dropbox has dropped this past quarter, it's still on the list. And you see other targets such as like Microsoft that have been on there basically eternally. Okay, I'm not sure if you guys can still hear me. I know I have an unstable connection. Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up from Max. All right. Okay. I believe my video is just kind of frozen a little bit here. Sorry about that. So let's talk about the predictions here in Q2 and beyond. Max, please feel free to take over if I do drop out here. But here's some of the major predictions that we are seeing, or that we are publishing for what we believe we're going to be seeing coming up. Law enforcement takedowns may lead to more diverse ransomware delivery. There have been a lot of different multinational efforts to take down the botnets in particular. So we previously mentioned CACbot, and then our continued analysis and keeping eyes on that situation led us to identifying Picabot and Darkgate. So that's where this prediction comes from, is that we believe that there's always something that's going to fill the vacuum. So with the CACbot botnet being taken offline, and from most of their infrastructure being either seized or nuked, it was an opportunity for other ransomwares, other malware families to fill that void, to be used to continue the threat activity. Right. I do apologize. I went out of order here too. But the first one we have up top there is small time-bound advanced campaigns will be more common. So we were mentioning earlier about how there may be a relative drop in overall volume, but that doesn't mean that the threat activity has subsided per se. So there may just be lower volumes of IOCs, but the threat activity is still very real and very present. And along with that, these smaller time-bounded campaigns, think like things targeting tax season or targeting specifically just the holidays. We believe that we're going to see those becoming more and more common. A variety of reasons for this, but perhaps one of the most notable is just that it is relevant. Right, it is related to real world events. So that is just another social engineering tactic that can lower defenses. And that's really the purpose there. Third on the list here, we're seeing that the proxy GET requests for second stage payloads will become more common, right? So we were talking about about how the subdomains of some of these legitimate services, such as Google AMP, LinkedIn Smart Links, they can assist in bypassing security apparatus. The second stage payloads, as we were covering in a previous slide,
All right, well, I will hop in for now. So we've been seeing more proxied GET requests for second stage payloads. So for example, there's a website called artemisrat.com. And when somebody reaches out to get a payload from this site, they're actually getting a payload from a different site, and artemisrat.com is acting as a proxy for that request. So it adds an extra layer of disguise for that chain, making it harder for people to take down the payload location. So over this quarter, we've seen a rise in that sort of behavior with artemisrat.com and some ridiculously long name that I honestly don't remember off the top of my head. So we've been seeing an increase in those proxy GET requests. And honestly, they've been pretty successful at keeping people from taking down the infrastructure. And if it continues to be successful, then we expect threat actors will continue to use it, and it will probably actually grow. So our last prediction here is about Web3 credential phishing. So we've talked about it before. In previous quarters, we've actually written strategic analyses on some major Web3 credential phishing when we kind of broke down the different components of it. And then for Q4 of last year, it really didn't shut down, but it definitely went down a lot in volume. And one of the reasons is that some of the major Web3 services went down. They just took themselves offline for different reasons. And it was never stated, but I wouldn't be surprised if law enforcement was involved in some of those because they just posted so much malicious content. But different websites have come up in return, like the Cloudflare IPFS website has recently popped up, and that is acting as a Web3 host for credential phishing and other malicious content. So we expect that's going to continue. We think it's starting to make a comeback.
Great. I'll take it from here if you're okay with that, Max.
Sure.
I just want to thank Jared, who's not online right now, and Max, you did a great job in backstopping for Jared. I think it's pretty safe to say Jared will be putting in an IT ticket for a new computer later today. But thank you all for joining us. We're going to go ahead and open the Q&A now. We do have some questions already in the chat, so we'll get started. Max, one of the questions is, why are PDFs so successful in getting to user inboxes?
Okay, so I can definitely answer that. So with our earlier statistic, we said 60% of the emails reaching enterprise inboxes, so typically ones protected by SEGs, were PDFs. And it's important to note that not all of those are necessarily malicious. A lot of those can be legitimate. So people use PDFs for a lot of legitimate business purposes. We've especially noticed it with our legal customers. They just send tons of PDFs back and forth. So not only do most normal people consider PDFs to be something that is legitimate, but SEGs also consider them to be legitimate and don't necessarily pay them as much attention as like a .exe. Like a SEG is going to block an executable. It shouldn't let one through. But a PDF, it's going to say, okay, well, this might have legitimate purposes, so it's going to allow it through. And recently, we've seen a lot of PDFs that have QR codes embedded in it. And because there's a QR code in it, there's not even a URL for the SEG to detect and scan. It's just an image. So it's just about impossible for most SEGs to detect PDFs with embedded QR codes. And as a result, they've become more popular. And honestly, I think we can expect to see more of this because it's very effective.
Great. Thank you, Max. Another question we've got is, do you have a theory on where Pinkabot and Darkgate are falling short of the Crackbot, do you expect them to keep trying, or do you expect an emergence of something different to try to fill the gap?
So the biggest place where they're falling short is their infrastructure. CACBot, certainly there was a big, scary botnet, did all kinds of bad things, but it started out small, and it didn't start to get noticed and do a lot of the truly malicious stuff until it had built up its collection of botnet nodes, until it had gotten to a point where law enforcement could take a node down and the net would be fine. It could continue operating. Picabot and just drawing a blank on the name. Darkgate. They have not had the same opportunity to build up their connections, so they can be taken down more easily. And that means they have to be a lot more careful. They cannot just go out full scale and attack everyone and expect to get good results the way CACBot could. So we've been seeing them more, and I expect they will be continued to be in use as they intend to expand their botnet, because they're going to be focusing on expansion and not necessarily on financial crimes like compromising information and selling it, like they would be if they were already established. So I think we can expect them to try and establish themselves more going forward. But honestly, I don't know how long it will take for them to really be well established. It just depends on how they do things. I don't see a major competitor just kind of popping up out of nowhere unless it is backed by the developers of CACBot or Emotet, because a lot of those developers, after the takedowns, those developers were without jobs. And as a result, they're looking for jobs. So if someone were to collect them and get them together, they can build something that would be pretty scary. So as long as those people don't work together, I don't expect anything to come up and challenge Darkgate and Picabot.
Gotcha. Thanks, Max. I want to address a question I saw come through quite a bit. You will definitely get a link to the presentation recording, as well as the report that goes along with this. It'll take maybe 24 hours to get the recorder to render, and then an email will go out with those two items. You will also be able to access our cofence.com website and get to the recording through our resources page. I want to go ahead and again thank Max, because he's the only one on, but Jared as well, and in absentia for their insights today. This is always a very interesting webinar to do each quarter. We learn a lot, and I think everybody probably feels the same way, that the reality is that email security is really mission critical to organizations, and the bad actors are doing everything they can to trick your employees into divulging sensitive company information. We can't settle for good enough, and it only takes really one breach to cause catastrophic damage. So with that being said, we'll end it today in respect of everybody's time. If we did not get to your question, we will follow up with you directly with an answer. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at a future webinar, and keep checking back to our website for more information on the next event that's taking place. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.